Are you a man keeper in your relationship? Are you constantly managing his moods, calming his outbursts, and tiptoeing to avoid conflict? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And today we're talking about what it means to be a man keeper in a narcissistic relationship and why it's emotional labor and not love. So let's get started. Hi, my name is Michele Paradise, and welcome back to my channel where I talk about evidence-based information coupled with my own personal experiences to help you navigate the most important relationship in your life, which is the one with yourself. So what is man-keeping? You might have heard this term, you might not have heard it yet. So let me unpack that for you. Man-keeping is the unspoken and often invisible emotional labor women take on in relationships. We can talk about it in a lighthearted way. You know, a lot of women do. They say, this is how it's always been in my relationship and I don't mind, and that's great. That's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about man keeping coupled with a narcissistic partner, which creates a different dynamic completely. Because you become the peacemaker, the mood manager, the emotional shock absorber. You remind him of birthdays, you soothe his ego when he's insecure, which for a narcissist will be most of the time. You help him regulate his emotions because he doesn't know how. He never learned that. This isn't about blame. I am not wanting to throw men under the bus here. It is what they haven't learned. They don't have the emotional capacity. It wasn't something that they were taught, because we need to be able to model this type of behavior in order to learn it. And that usually comes from our parents. I'm not blaming them either, because they came into your life most likely with their own traumas, unresolved, unprocessed. So what you do in a man-keeping dynamic with a narcissist is you interpret his silences. We do a lot of mind reading, which is very, very dangerous. You decode his moods. You patch things up when he explodes or withdraws. You take the blame for things when they're not even yours to own. And the hardest part is you've been conditioned to believe that this is love. But here's the truth. It's not your job to raise an emotionally stunted adult. And when this dynamic is paired with narcissistic traits, it becomes even more toxic and off the charts. And that's really what I'm focusing on today. I'm not just talking about man keeping in general, although I wanted you to understand the concept. I also want you to understand the concept within a narcissistic relationship, because it's extremely toxic. So let's talk about narcissism with the lens of man keeping. A narcissist doesn't just want love, they want admiration, they want control and emotional service. I always picture this man sitting on a throne, whatever that means to you. They're grandiose and they're expecting service, emotional service and physical service as well. You know, a lot of these men want to be waited on in every possible way. They outsource their emotional needs. And guess what? You become the full-time employee. You may even have a job outside of the home. You may be the person that's the breadwinner. You may be the person that enables everybody in the house to have health insurance and things like that. And they do nothing. They just sit back, read a book, watch a TV show, go online, comment about things. And you're the worker bee that is running around doing everything. You reassure them constantly. You're blamed when they feel insecure. Now, I'm talking about man keeping in a narcissistic relationship, not a typical relationship. You're expected to be the cheerleader, the therapist, the punching bag, all in one person. Meanwhile, your needs, well, they're usually dismissed. Your feelings, they are minimized. Your exhaustion, which will be profound. I've seen this with so many women. They are mentally, psychologically, physically, emotionally exhausted. That will be ignored because it doesn't fulfill their needs. And for the narcissist, that's all that matters. Remember, it's incoming. They are, I always have my trusted little post-it note here. They are the center of the world, and we are all on their supply wheel. You're a spoke on their supply wheel until they don't need you anymore, or you've reached your ability to serve them. They will come back for you if they want to, which is called hoovering. So this is where you are. They are in the middle and everything is incoming to them. They may say things like, oh, you're overreacting. Maybe you're burned out and emotional and tearful and you have nothing left in the tank. And they will accuse you of being overacting and overreacting as well. They may say, why are you so emotional? You're always so emotional. That's a big one. Wanting to project that you are very, very sensitive. And that's your problem, not their problem. So this is another form of gaslighting. They may say, if you loved me, you'd understand. You'd understand that I'm not well. You'd understand that I don't know how to do that. You'd understand that I don't have time for that. And before you know it, you're stuck in a pattern where you feel guilty for wanting basic respect. I'm going to say that one again because this is so important. Because this is the unconscious, involuntary place that we get stuck in. So I'll say it again. Before you know it, you're stuck in a pattern where you feel guilty for wanting basic respect and human kindness. This is not love. This is you being emotionally recruited to regulate someone else's ego. I know that's hard to hear. So here's what happens to you when you're a man keeper. Pay attention. Number one, you lose your voice. When I say voice, you may literally lose your voice, but I'm talking about emotionally. You just don't know how to stand in your truth or speak your truth. Number two, you stop trusting your gut. When you stop trusting your gut, you will lose all sense of boundaries. So this is about coming back to self. Number three, you walk on eggshells constantly. You're constantly afraid of doing or saying something wrong. And I'll say wrong in inverted commas because it's not wrong. It's just they perceive it to be wrong. All right. And number four, you feel more like a caretaker than a partner. You're looking after all their needs, their emotional needs, their physical needs, their financial needs, even. And number five, you end up exhausted, anxious, and sometimes ashamed for feeling resentful. And I have this equation, and it goes like this. You've heard me say it before. Where there's resentment, that equals a boundary. In other words, if you feel resentment, you need a boundary, and only you can put that boundary in place. No one else can do that. So this is boundary stuff now. I want you to start to think about the smallest little boundary you can put in place in this situation that you're in now as a man keeper to a narcissist. You might even start to think you are the problem. I've seen and heard that. I've had people say that to me, but I don't do enough. He thinks I don't love him enough or whatever, or that you're too sensitive. That if you could be just a little bit more patient or more understanding, things would get better. It's always about you being more and not taking up space. But no amount of patience will fix someone who's using your empathy as their power source. Okay, it's like they plug into you and you are the power source. And you give them the energy and the understanding and the time and the space to do everything that they need to do. So ask yourself these questions. Are you constantly checking his mood before you speak? That's a big one. Or this, do you feel responsible for his happiness more than your own? Especially if you're empathic and a people pleaser, this will be a big one. And I would say the answer would be yes. Or this question, do you make excuses for his behavior, even to yourself? Or what about, do you feel selfish for setting boundaries or asking for help? A lot of people feel selfish and they feel guilt. And all that is wanting to manage the outcome of the boundary. And we cannot manage the outcome. If we say no to something, it is going to have a different response. We need to accept that and manage our expectations around that and not be upset when the outcome is different, because of course a boundary is going to create a different outcome for both of you. Or what about, do you feel like you're the only one that is trying to make the relationship work? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, you may be trapped in a man-keeping, narcissistic relationship. Now, know this, not all men are narcissists. There are many, many, many men, really good men out there that are not narcissists, but I'm not talking about them. So if you're doing all the emotional work, it's time to ask yourself a very powerful question. Am I being loved or am I being managed? And even the word managed has man in it. Because real love doesn't need a caretaker. Real love shares the load. It might not always be 50-50, but it is much more than 100 to 0. Okay? Real love shares the load. It's mutual, it's safe, and it leaves room for your needs, your voice, and your healing. If this hits home, you're not alone. I meet many women in my practice that have experienced this, and I see a lot of this come up in my social media messages. You don't need to keep proving your worth by holding it all together. You're allowed to want peace. You're allowed to drop the ball. You're allowed to have balance and real reciprocal love. So if this resonates, please subscribe to my channel or pass it on to somebody in your life that might need to hear this. And if you're healing from narcissistic relationships, I've got some free tools. We're going to put the links below, and they will allow you to deep dive into some resources that are waiting for you. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing you're tired of managing in your relationship? You deserve more than emotional labor. You deserve to feel loved, not used. Thank you very much for following me today and listening to my video. All that remains for me to say is please stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.